Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of RPGs with Paddy. I'm Paddy. Today we're going to be looking at the scenario, the Yorkshire Horror, which is the included scenario in Cthulhu by Gaslight, 1st and 2nd edition. It was originally written for the 1st edition in 1986. And it's a little bit unclear who wrote the scenario, but the entire Cthulhu by Gaslight was put together by William A. Barton. So I'm pretty sure he wrote this scenario. This scenario is designed for experienced investigators, not new investigators. Let me be very clear about that. So in a separate publication, Kevin Jacklin did a huge roundup of a lot of Sherlock Holmes or Gaslight era games in the publication Games International, issue 12. He criticizes this scenario just a little bit while praising the overall product, Cthulhu by Gaslight. He points out that this scenario is too long for players who are new to Call of Cthulhu or Victorian England, and also that it takes place in Yorkshire while most of the Cthulhu by Gaslight sourcebook talks about London. So there's kind of a disconnect there. So now I will give you just a quick introduction, spoiler free, very short. The investigators are called in to help a friend of theirs who is a private investigator. The private investigator's brother has been accused of murder, but the private investigator is caught up in another case, so he can't prove his brother's innocence, but he's sure that he's innocent. Can the investigators go in his stead and sort it out? So that introduction is purposefully vague for reasons we'll go into after this. But now it's time for the spoiler warning. So anyone thinking of playing this scenario as a player, don't go any further because you will ruin the whole mystery of the scenario. But if there's any keepers out there, or people who have already played the game, or those who just want to learn about it but not play it, then let's get on with that. But please don't blame me if you spoil the adventure for yourself. Okay, so this scenario is long and complicated. I have a lot to say about this, but first let's just go through how it appears in the book, and then I'll try and break it down into something a little bit easier for you to understand, and I'll point out my maybe the flaws that I see in it, and also suggest maybe just a few ways on how you can improve this scenario if you really want to go through with it. But yeah, at the start, the keeper's introductory information is a little bit sparse at first. So we know that investigators should have some knowledge of Cthulhu mythos and spells. We know that Sherlock Holmes, Dr. Watson, Professor Moriarty, Mycroft Holmes, Sherrinford Holmes will take part in this. Sherrinford is Sherlock and Mycroft's brother, but it's not canon. In the traditional Arthur Conan Doyle books, Sherrinford doesn't exist, but he does appear in a Doctor Who crossover, which I haven't read, but I will look into, which also ties in with some Cthulhu mythos there, incidentally. But that is irrelevant for this scenario. So I didn't mention the names of those famous characters in the introduction because this scenario also provides a list of pseudonyms if you want to keep playing this game but you don't want to introduce Sherlock Holmes because that could break the immersion for your players. So that's why I didn't include it in the introduction in case you want to have it without that. I thought that inclusion of all of the list of the synonyms was excellent. Great point. So the investigators will get a letter from Sherlock saying that his brother Sherrinford has been arrested for murder But Sherlock can't intervene because he's busy in another case. Can the investigators help? So a little bit strange that Sherlock would be so busy with something else that he couldn't help his brother. It's vaguely explained later. But then we get a little bit more keeper information. So Sherringford is innocent, and it is all part of the plan of Sherlock's nemesis, Moriarty, Professor Moriarty. He was secretly researching the Necronomicon, and he didn't die at the Reichenbach Falls. So this was in the Sherlock Holmes story, when Sherlock takes Moriarty over the falls to kill both of them, allegedly. But instead, actually, Moriarty, using the Necronomicon, learned how to create a gate. So as he fell over the falls, he survived and he was transported back to a safe location. So Holmes thinks he's dead, and he has been secretly bringing back his criminal syndicate so that Holmes won't be aware of it. He also wants to learn more about the occult and then to plan a secret revenge upon Holmes. So his plan is to, he has got in touch with some cultists, and they're going to take up key roles as staff members in Sherringford's manor home in Yorkshire. And he hopes to lure Sherlock to Yorkshire, and he wants to sacrifice Sherlock and Sherringford and Mycroft to the great old ones on Walpurgis night, which is April 30th, I think. There is also a little bit about what Sherlock knows. He knows that Moriarty's right-hand man, Moran, has escaped from prison, and he suspects some occultism or maybe mythos magic at play. But he knows that he is not capable of handling it on his own, so that's why he brings in the investigators. So that's why your investigators should have sufficient experience with the mythos. The keeper is advised to set their own timeline for how long this plays out over, based on your own players, so that it will align to take place on April 30th. And they estimate about a week is a good amount of time to do that. So now back to the main story. The investigators will arrive in Yorkshire and will see the local constable, Danvers Culverton, and from Scotland Yard, Tobias Gregson, leaving the manor. Very little information can be gained from them, but if you have bad interactions with them now, it can really hinder you later in the game. So the very first thing that you do could mess up the rest of your investigation. Or it's not an impossible roadblock, but it just really makes things a little bit more difficult. But then Graves, the groundskeeper, introduces you to Jevers, who is Sherringford's butler, who will then bring you in to talk to Sherringford himself. And Sherringford has a lot to tell them. There's a really long thing, spreads over 2 pages, which is presented as just a monologue for Sherringford, or the keeper, as Sherringford to expose to the players. I would advise not monologuing it, but to have some bullet points that you want to express to the players and allow it to kind of come out naturally as the players are asking you questions. The reason you use bullet points is just make sure that you've got all of the key points. You've said all of the key points by the time the questions are over. So the main points that I've picked out from this are Fishbane is the dead man, and he was a recent hire. He was hounding Lucinda, the maid, who has worked for Sherringford for the last 4 years since she was 13, so now she's 17. Stark, one of the workers in the manor, vouched for Fishbane, saying that he worked with him before and he's just down on his luck. Stark has been working with Sherringford for 2 years, and he has helped recruiting a lot of new men from outside of the area. And so far there hasn't been any trouble with any of the hired men. Another point is Sherringford had given many warnings to Fishbane to stop hounding Lucinda. And Sherringford has been feeling extra angry towards him recently. Sherringford had mutton curry for dinner that night. This is presented in the monologue as almost a throwaway line. I've got it right here. Oh, had curried mutton for supper. My favourite dish. Must get Mrs. Hooper to fix it for you sometime. You like curry, don't you? Of course you do. Then Stark came to me. So in that point, it's kind of just a very much a throwaway line, but the mutton curry was poisoned, so that's an important point. So then he fell asleep and woke up to find himself holding a dagger and standing over the man. Further questions coming after you've got this information can reveal also that Graves, Jevers, and Mrs. Hooper have been working here for forever, essentially. Lucinda is 17 and she's been working here for 4 years. So she was a child really at 13 when she started working here, so Sherringford is quite protective of her. And around 2 years ago, Stark started working here, and he's been recommending people when some of the local people working in the manor quit or disappear. He's recommending people to replace them, and so far all of them have been great. And that's about it. So now you can look around the house, and there are several locations. Some of them have nothing really. So Sherringford's study, among other things, because there are so many places, I'll just talk about the key bits of information in each location. So in Sherringford's study, a spot hidden can reveal some chalk marks on the wall, and a second spot hidden finds a rat hole. In the greenhouse, there's lots of different plants growing here. If you sit here quietly at night and do a listen roll, you hear scratching. And if you do another listen roll, you hear something, and it's almost like voices, but you can't get any more than that. If you start tearing up some of the plants to kind of get to the walls, and you succeed in both a spot hidden and a luck roll, you might find some rat holes. So some of the information is really hidden, where I doubt people would really find them. Up next is the game room, and on the underside of the billiard table, or snooker or pool table, is a gate, another gate written in chalk. It's very hard to find because it's actually written on the underside of the table, and the old billiard tables would have been quite deep. Next in the foyer, or foyer for you Americans, we'll say foyer. A small rat hole can be found here. That's about it. In the sitting room, nothing much. In the dining room, nothing much. In the pantry, you can find a jar of curry, which Sherringford has recommended to you. But if you have a chemistry or a pharmacy roll, you can identify traces of opium. And if you don't find it every night, there is a 15% chance that you get served a curry, and then you will be poisoned. And next is the servants' waiting area. So this is between the dining room and the kitchen. The servants wait to kind of, when it's ready in the kitchen, to bring it out to you. There's nothing of interest here. Just a bit period, I guess. And in the kitchen, there is in the description it says the attached root cellar, but it's actually quite far away. But the root cellar, if you go down, there is a 15% chance that you will encounter a rat thing, which I'll get to in a moment. And a spot hidden in the kitchen finds a rat hole at the back of a cupboard. In Mrs. Hooper's room, so this is the cook's room, there's nothing much, but she's clearly scared after everything that's happened. And in Jevers' room, there is a fancy sparkling mirror, which turns out it's got like some diamond dust in it. It's totally normal, but that's just kind of like a distraction. There's also a water closet, a bathroom, so nothing much in there. Then in Lucinda's room, so she's the young maid who Fishbane was harassing, but possibly she was welcoming it as well. So under her pillow is a gold chain with a bat-winged octopus. and this was something that I think either Fishbane or Stark gave to her, talking about, we're going to get out of here. Next up is the hired men's room. So all of them have large footlockers. But the only one of interest is Stark's footlocker, which has a thick padlock on it. Inside there is an enchanted dagger, similar to the one used in the murder, and the Sussex manuscript, which is a mythos tome. But if you try and break into this footlocker, it has magic protection on it, and 1d6 rat things will be summoned and attack you. There is a very large closet in the hired men's room, which at the back of it, behind all of the coats, there's also a gate in chalk on the back of the closet. And another point that it says here is all of the workmen will abandon the manor after the second murder. And you might be saying, what second murder? You don't know yet. So this is what I was saying about the keeper information should have been at the start. But anyway, then there's also Graves' room, nothing much. Utility building, nothing much there. And the stables, nothing much there. But if you poke around or lie down in the hay, there's a 15% chance that you will get bitten by a rat thing. Up next, we'll move to the first floor. So for any Americans out there, that is actually the second floor. We have the ground floor and the first floor, or in American, the first floor and the second floor. So on the first floor, so upstairs, there is the master bedroom for Sherringford, of course. And again, really nothing much here, but a small chink in one of the stones around the fireplace shows that if you get down there and you maybe shine a torch down there, it shows that it leads to another rat hole. There's a water closet, nothing much there. There's a storage room, nothing much there. And there's also a number of guest bedrooms. I think 2 on this floor. I'm not sure. But late at night, if an investigator is sleeping here and awake, if they're quiet, they can have a listen roll, and it sounds like there are lots of rats running around the insides of the walls. Finally, well, not finally actually, but you can go upstairs to the attic as well, and there is a gate drawn on the wall, kind of hidden at the back, and it's also been lacquered there, so it can't just be wiped off. But if you think to cleanse it with chemicals, it will leave a smoking image of the last person to have travelled through the gate. Now, there's no list of who travels through the gate at what, in which order, and when, so I don't know who would appear. There's only one person who talks about using this one, which is Moran, who is Moriarty's right hand. I'm also not entirely sure about a smoking image, if that would be like a silhouette, because that would be quite difficult to identify anyway. And also in the attic you can use track or a spot hidden to reveal some rat tracks in the dust. But they're a little bit strange because they look like rat tracks, but the footprints look a little bit more like very, very miniature human hands. That's because they're the rat things. Then finally for the house, you can go down into the basement. You might notice a draft, and if you follow the draft, spot hidden will reveal a rat hole, and if you knock around the wall, some of it sounds hollow. You can break through here, which will reveal a tunnel, which eventually will lead to the Church of Starry Wisdom. What's the Church of Starry Wisdom? You don't know yet, but we'll get to that in a bit. So now, just to give you a little background, the rat things are essentially rats, but with human faces and human hands, but they're the size of rats. The main mythos influence for this is Brown Jenkins, who appears in Dreams in the Witch House by H.P. Lovecraft. But as to their involvement in this, it's a little bit all over the place. But now, after you know the layout of the, or now that you know the layout of this, it gives you the different people who you can interview in the manor. So you've already spoken to Sherringford a lot, but generally He's good-natured, but he can't stand unchivalrous behaviour. So that's why he was very mad at Fishbane for his transgressions. There's also Graves, who is fiercely loyal, and he believes in the occult, but he won't admit it unless he trusts the players. If he trusts the players, he will say that he thinks Stark has mesmerized Sherringford and give some information about the men who left, the local men, and then they were replaced by Stark's men. So he really doesn't trust Stark. Actually, he's wrong about Stark having mesmerized Sherringford, because, as you'll find out later, it doesn't tell you now, but as you find out later, that's not how he kills or how he frames Sherringford. But just a sidetrack there. Jevers, as a butler, believes himself too sophisticated to believe in anything unnatural. He is fiercely loyal to Holmes, presumably the whole Holmes family, but particularly Sherringford. And the book actually says Jevers should be of little help to the investigators overall. Great. So up next is the cook, Mrs. Hooper. Hooper. One of those anyway. And she doesn't know much, but she does know some local rumours that the local witches have meetings at the nearby Standing Stones, and that the old church nearby is haunted. That's the Church of Starry Wisdom. Lucinda is the young maid who is being harassed by Fishbane from Sherringford's point of view, but it seems that she was interested in him as well. But she was taken in by Fishbane's seductive words and the hopes of a better life. She is actually the one who poisoned the curry. She's afraid to say anything in case Stark kills her. She is about to tell the investigators what happened, but then she gets murdered in the second murder, which is, again, yet to be explained. So reading through all of this can be quite confusing because key points of the plot are not revealed until later in the book. And then the last main person is Stark, and he was a former Navy man, or is a former Navy man, and he considers himself, although he wouldn't reveal this to the players, he considers himself Moriarty's partner, not his underling. He has the power to summon night gaunts, and he managed to ally with the rat things which were infesting the nearby abandoned church. So they weren't originally part of the plan, but when he came to the manor and he found out the rat things were infesting the nearby church, he decided to ally with them. When he's talking to the investigators at first, he will try to accidentally, he will try to incriminate Sherringford by accidentally letting something slip. So he appears to be saying nice things, but really it looks like he's pointing the finger at, or what he's saying is meant to be nice, but actually it seems to incriminate Sherringford more. And finally, for in the manor, there are the hired men. These are all of Deep One ancestry, but they haven't started transforming yet. Fishbane had started looking a little bit more fish-like, but none of these men are cooperative at all. They won't be, hostile towards you yet, but they certainly can't give you anything too much. So, now that you know about the manor, now we can start to look at the local surroundings. So, there are the local tenant farms, and all of the people there seem to like Sherringford because he forgave, when he took over as the Lord of the Manor, he forgave their debt, and so they can, I think they might own their own farms now. But one thing that they don't like is that he has started hiring outsiders at the recommendation of Stark. So they would prefer if he was hiring local people still. That's all. So there are some other small villages surrounding, and you might run into Sherlock in disguise. It says in the book as well, this encounter is just to let the investigators know that he hasn't forgotten about them. Another place of interest is the Standing Stones, which the cook might have mentioned if you were talking to her. Stark occasionally summons monsters from here. If the investigators see him here, he will send things after them. These are they're called Thing 1 and Thing 2, and they kind of resemble giant snakes. If the investigators decide to go here when Stark is not here, they can cast Contact Nyarlathotep. I can't understand why they would cast that. But if they do, the servitors of Nyarlathotep will will appear and answer questions, but very misleading and really false information. They will say things like, Fishbane lives yet, seek not his murderer. Or, we cannot say, ask High Priest Sharonford. I do actually really like these false clues because it increases the paranoia in the players that maybe actually Sharonford is up to no good. So in a more straightforward adventure, or if there was a more straightforward way to get this information, rather than going to the Standing Stones and summoning or contacting Nyarlathotep, I can't imagine many players thinking to do that. But the next section is equally bemusing. So this is Old Eben's kind of land. It's a forest run by an old crazy man who's really a druid. He will start shooting at trespassers on his land, and if he's really threatened, he can also summon some dark youngs. Basically, he won't take part in the adventure at all on either side, so most of the time he's completely irrelevant. The only way to get him on your side is to somehow get talking to him by physically overpowering him, and then prove that the investigators know about woods and druids by passing an occult roll, a botany roll, and an archaeology roll. All three. You have to pass all three. And the way it's worded in the adventure is that one investigator has to answer all three, has to roll all three. For someone to be skilled in occult, yeah, sure, that's reasonable enough. Archaeology, maybe. Botany is rare. It seems like it might have been a little bit more common in third edition when this was made. But the base skill is 0%. So you have to actively put points into botany to even have a chance of doing that. But even with that, even if you put in a few points, like it's so unlikely that you will succeed in all three of these. Anyway, that's that. So he can be actually quite a powerful ally, but seeing as it's almost impossible to get him, I'll just kind of leave it there. So the next place you might want to go is the Northallerton Constabulary. This has the evidence, including the sacrificial dagger, which is locked in a safe. There is a 70% chance that Constable Culverton is present. He was the one who you might have met at the manor before. And a separate 70% chance that his aide, Ted Marvin, is here. If they haven't annoyed Culverton before, they have a chance to make a law or a persuade roll here to convince him to share some information. If you fail either of these, he will be polite, but he won't share information. If you have ever lied to him or misled him, he will threaten imprisonment for obstructing justice or something like that. If only Ted is there, he can share just the tiniest bit of information, but he won't open the safe without Culverton's approval. If you do manage to gain Culverton's approval, he will give you some information. He might even let you look at the knife, the dagger. And if you've impressed him, he can also give you a letter of introduction to the doctor, the coroner. So in the doctor's office, if you have Culverton's letter, or someone is an MD, a medical doctor, and succeeds with an oratory roll, you can get the official records. If only one of those things is true, for example, you have So if you have Culverin's letter, you're safe, I think. But if you have an MD, or if you are an MD, but you don't succeed in your oratory role, or if you succeed in your oratory role but you're not a doctor, you can get some basic information. If you have neither of those, nothing. So this is the investigation of Fishbane. So some of the descriptions might lead your players to guess the truth that Fishbane is a deep one. The other important information is that he has a tattoo of an octopus. And actually all of the hard men do as well. But that doesn't seem to come up. It's just an identifying mark. But they could easily explain it away because they were all involved in the Navy in some way. So it could be a Navy tattoo. The doctor can also say that he has seen some of the servants in the manor treating them for rat bites. But he says something that they looked a little bit more like monkey bites. So this is referencing the fact that they're rat things, so rat-sized things with human bodies, which is why they look like monkey bites. So the next place you can go is the local inn, the Red Rooster Inn, and really there's just a few rumours here. Someone says that a local girl, Mina Falworth, has been hanging out with Stark, and Johnny Clay is also present. Who's he? He's one of the first original servants at the manor who quit. So he talks about maybe having a dream or something like that when he was there where rats came in and he thought he was meeting Satan, but he saw a rat with a human face kind of crawling all over him. So after that he got out of there. He's very still upset by this, so anything kind of set him off quite badly. The next place you can go to is Albert's Emporium, so you can buy a lot of things here if you want, but the main thing is that Mina Falworth works here, but she won't tell anything about her relationship with Stark. For the Keeper, Stark has kind of promised her, similar to Lucinda, that, together they can get away and start a new life together. And the final place before the church is the North Riding County Archivist. So you can get some records here about the manor, about the church, and some old Roman record talking about the rat things. Excuse me. So now we finally get to the church. So there's a few ways to get to here. First, you can get here from the tunnel which connects the manor to the church. This is how the rats move between the two places. If you go through here, at the end of the tunnel, so just before you get to the church, there is a wall blocked up which has an elder sign on it, and the rats have been forced to go around it. If you break down the wall enough that you can crawl through it, the elder sign becomes useless then. If you come in above ground, you have to enter either the front door or the side door. The side door is locked and quite strong, but the front door is open. When you're inside, if you go, I can't remember if it's right or left, but one side leads to has a ladder leading up to a trapdoor which is locked and it's difficult to open, but if you do, it will bring you to a belfry, which is empty except for a stone with an elder sign on it. If it's nighttime, there are also some nightgaunts here. But back on the ground floor, if you go to the other side, there's a small room there which seems empty, but if you look around you can find a Cthulhu Mythos tome which has the spell Summon Nightgaunt and Dread Curse of Azathoth. But they have been renamed to more periodically thematic names. It's strange that this tome has Summon Nightgaunt because actually the Nightgaunts who might appear over here have been summoned using the Necronomicon, so it's a little bit strange. So on the altar of the church, there is dried entrails, dried blood and entrails, and behind the altar you can find the rest of the dead dog that they've come from. The podium hides a trapdoor which leads to the basement. If it's nighttime, The Necronomicon is sitting open on the podium to the Summon Night Gaunt spell. But down in the basement is a huge wooden statue of Cthulhu. It can be moved to reveal a tunnel behind it. But the large statue, when you're moving it, you have to make a luck roll or dodge roll, or possibly both, to get out of the way, or the statue could fall on you and it will do 4d6 damage, which is an average, if you're rolling, of 14 damage, which is enough to kill most investigators. That would be a terrible way to go, a very anticlimactic. But if you follow the tunnel, that will lead to a coffin in a tomb in the churchyard. So it's just like kind of like a secret way in. But presumably the cultists know about it as well. When you are in the back in the basement, if you go down this way, you appear to be greeted by a number of monsters, and you have to make a sanity roll. But actually, they are just very lifelike costumes. Why? I don't know. They're not used again. Or, well, they're never used. And given the fact that they can summon Dark Youngs and Night Gaunts, I don't know why they would need to have costumes to make themselves look like Dark Young or Night Gaunts or anything else. Besides the point. So if you go the other way in the basement, you'll find several human skeletons. And elsewhere in the basement, you can find a variety of liquids, and they're all listed here. You can find Stark's diary. There's a thick pamphlet by Moriarty on the dynamics of an asteroid, which is his famous publication. And then you can also find the Necronomicon here if it's not up on the podium. So if it's nighttime, it's up on the podium. If it's not nighttime, it's down here in the basement. All of these are on some shelves, and behind the shelves is another gate painted on the wall. So, if the investigators come at night, they will hear the sounds of something in the belfry. Basically, they should run, or else 2d4 night gaunts will start attacking them. And there's kind of like miniature kind of chase rules here as well, depending on the mode of transport the players use. If the investigators come back to the church a second time, regardless of how they came the first time, if they left any evidence of having been there, now there will be a cultist guard here who will be secretly watching them. Also, if their first visit to the church happens after the third murder, what third murder? We'll get to that in a second. Then all of the hired men with Stark have abandoned that house. And so there's always going to be a guard around the church from that point on. So the guard will watch them go in, and he'll try and trap them in the basement and call for backup through the gates. If Stark comes, he may summon a Dark Young, and rat things can also come in through the tunnel or through the gates and try to attack them. So the investigators may be able to sneak to the church at night during one of the cultists' rituals, which could include sacrificing Mina, who is the town girl who's going out with Stark, if the timing works out for that. If the investigators are captured at this point, they will be transferred to Moriarty's London headquarters, or Moriarty will come to them, because Moriarty wants to question them. After he's bored with them, he will give them back to Stark for Stark to kill them. But at this point, once Moriarty goes away, and maybe the book recommends maybe when the investigators are being tied to a post for throwing knife practice or something like that, Sherlock can appear and save them. And basically, if that happens, he gets them safe home to the manor, and then he disappears again, like immediately. So I know the writer of this scenario didn't want to have Holmes there as just an automatic success or solving every riddle. But it's having this Deus Ex Machina with Sherlock is a little bit contrived. Anyway, that's beside the point. So now that we're almost at the end of all of the pages written here, we finally get the events. So what's going to happen in this scenario? So a few days after the investigators arrive, Lucinda wants to tell them something, and asks them to come to her room at night, which is highly inappropriate as well. She wants to tell them that she poisoned the curry, and Stark and Fishbone are all working together. But the investigators arrive too late, and she is lying dead at the feet of a dark figure wielding the dagger. The investigators presumably want to try and tackle him, and they find out that it is Sherrinford. So he denies any knowledge of this, but Jevers takes the worried master to his bed. Now the players have a little bit of time to investigate the crime scene before the police arrive. But there's not that much to be found. Mostly there's a few uncleaned chalk lines around, and some rat holes in both Sherringford's room and Lucinda's room. When the constable Culverton arrives, he assumes Sherringford is guilty and arrests him. What happened was the cultists drugged Sherringford's wine. Then Stark sent a rat thing into the room of Sherringford with some chalk, and the rat thing drew a gate on the wall. Then some cultists came in through the gate, took Sherringford, the drugged Sherringford, to Lucinda's room, which also had a rat thing go in and make a gate there. Then the cultists murdered Lucinda and put Sherringford holding the knife standing over her body, and then they escaped through the gate. It seems like there should be an easier way for this, for genius of Moriarty's level. Anyway, the next night is the third murder, and this time it is Mrs. Hooper, the cook, who will be the victim. This time no one is found over the body, but the window is open. The investigators start looking around, but then they see the constable, Culverton, arriving to say, so they haven't contacted him, but the constable, Culverton, arrives to say that Sherringford has escaped from jail. So he escaped from jail around about the same time that the third murder happened, so obviously the connection is that it was Sherringford. At this stage, so immediately after the murder, all of the hired men and Stark have abandoned the manor at this stage. If you point this out to Culverton, he says it's only natural for them to be afraid because the help keeps getting murdered in this house, so they feel right to escape. But if the investigators go into town at this time, they will also find out that Mina has been kidnapped. She has been transported by gate to Moriarty's place in London, until she will be transported back to the church this evening to be sacrificed. I'm not sure why they have to move her around so much, but anyway. But the investigators can see the sacrifice taking place at the church, and they can try to stop this, or she might die as well. After this, so after the night of the third murder, there is a 50% chance every night of the manor being attacked by the cultists. If the players have seen the face of either Moriarty or his right hand, Moran, that goes up to an 80% chance. And two main ways that they will attack is 1d6 night gaunts will be sent to attack the manor, which is pretty bad. Or alternatively, Colonel Moran, who is an excellent shooter, might attack in person with his guns, and he might escape through the gate, well, any of the gates, but particularly the gate in the attic if things are looking bad. But it says when things are getting really bad, the investigators might reach out to Mycroft. So Holmes said that he's basically not available, but if they have any urgent matters, that his brother Mycroft might be able to help them. So Mycroft will send word that he is coming to the manor to help them. If they haven't sent anything, Mycroft will use his connections to know what's going on and send them a telegram saying he's coming immediately. If the investigators go to meet him at the station the next day, he doesn't get off. They can ask around, but basically he has been kidnapped. now they might want to get in contact with Sherlock directly. If they send a telegram to Baker Street, they get a reply saying Dr. Watson is on the way and he arrives safely. But he is not particularly helpful. He's just another body. So then, according to the scenario, they might head back to the manor. And at some point, Stark will return in disguise and attack Jevers, hoping to lure the party into a chase because he has a dark young waiting for them to attack them if they chase him. If they survive all of this and they make it back to the manor, they arrive just as Inspectors Lestrade and Hopkins from Scotland Yard are here at the request of Sherlock Holmes. So they got a telegram from Sherlock Holmes asking them to come here, saying it's urgent. But given that Sherlock and none of the Holmes brothers are here, they will just start working with the investigators. So now it should be around about Walpurgis night or day, and all signs point towards maybe sacrificing Mycroft at the church. But when you get to the church, it's empty. Now you have to find a secret gate. So you might have already explored this before. This is where you learn about how the gate is, creating a gate is a special spell. And it costs 3 power to create it, which I think the players can kind of ignore. But it costs 3 magic points to pass through. Excuse me. And all of the gates lead into limbo, from where they can access all of the other gates open to the same limbo. But this limbo is outside of time and space. There are 10 sample gates given. So from limbo, you can go to random places. And some of them are terrible. So some of them could actually just immediately kill you as well if you choose the wrong gate. And there seems to be no way to know which one is which, apart from just going through it. Now, you can kind of put your hand through it as well, and that might work. Anyway, yeah, it might just be down to luck. So eventually you guess correctly, maybe, and you arrive at Moriarty's London hideout. And there's still a few remaining cultists here, and there might be a small battle there. But actually, this is not the right location. Actually, you need to go back through the gate and go through the gate that leads you to Stonehenge 2,000 years ago. So if I hadn't mentioned it before, I think I might have forgotten to mention it. The limbo is outside of time and space. So, yes. So at this stage, there was no talk about, going back in time. There was no talk really about Stonehenge. There was a tiny connection with the standing stones, but like you might guess, okay, we need to go to the church. And then when the church is empty, you're like, okay, maybe we need to go to Moriarty's London hideout. Okay. I don't know how you reason that you should go back through the gate and go to Stonehenge. If it was me playing it and I came out at Moriarty's hideout and found only a few cultists left, I would assume they had all come back here and then gone off somewhere else in London. But that's not the case. Anyway, if you force your players anyway to get to Stonehenge 2,000 years ago, you arrive and you can see Mycroft tied to the altar stone, ready to be sacrificed. Sherringford is also there, tied to a stone. And as you approach someone, Sherlock announces himself and says he's glad you could make it. There are also several cultists or hybrid deep ones or hybrid serpent men here for the sacrifice as well. And Nyarlathotep in his avatar as the Black Man is also here. Whew. So what happens next is really up to the investigators. If they join in a battle, melee battle, Holmes shouts out to leave Moriarty to him. He has to be the one to kill him. This is absolute hubris talking at this moment, because really with the odds stacked against you, even if you've got all of your investigators and Dr. Watson and Lestrade and the other guy and Holmes all together, you're going to be going up against a lot of enemies, and they can summon even more enemies as well. Good luck. If Nyarlathotep will just kind of stand there watching, and if he is fired at and hit, he will start growing, taking on his crawling chaos form. But after about 5 rounds, once he reaches the final crawling chaos form, he will disappear into the sky. Why was he here? Anyway, and if throughout the battle, however the battle plays out, up to your investigators, and Sherlock will suggest like maybe splitting up and some people trying to attack and save some of the others as well. But your investigators can come up with whatever they want. If it looks like his side is losing, Moriarty will try to draw a gate in chalk and try to escape. If Moriarty's side is winning, Sherlock can produce a fuse bomb, classic fuse bomb, to help turn the tide. So again, you've got a little bit of the Sherlock Deus Ex Machina here, which it's fine anyway. If either of his brothers are killed during this, Sherlock will never work with the investigators again, blaming himself for trusting such an important mission to your incompetent investigators. The game also suggests using Call Deity to call Azathoth or call Yog-Sothoth. And in fact, calling Yog-Sothoth, they say, may be the best choice. I think this is crazy to expect that your players might consider calling Yog-Sothoth. I guess there's a lot of cultists that you're up against and you just want total destruction. But I'm pretty sure if you call Yog-Sothoth, I think the Holmes brothers will be dying, and likely yourself as well. So I don't really understand that. If the battle turns out badly and Moriarty manages to sacrifice Mycroft and then Sherringford, he, throughout the sacrificial ritual, he will gain their POW, so their willpower, which makes him even more so superhumanly intelligent, and thus not even Sherlock can stop him from taking over everything. If the scenario ends well, and they save people and maybe kill Moriarty, then they will have Sherlock's gratitude and respect, and he pays them well. And apart from a few minor sanity rewards, depending on how it goes, that's where the scenario ends. It has some good points, definitely, but it is all over the place. This review has cut down on all of the fluff that's in there, just getting down to the key points. And it's still, I'm sure you feel, listening to this, it was still pretty difficult to follow what's going on. So, here are my main problems with this scenario. The layout is really confusing for the keeper. You don't find out what's going to happen until towards the end of the scenario. Similarly, you don't know that there will be multiple murders, and it takes forever until you learn how the cultists managed to frame Sherringford. When you're writing a mystery role-playing game, everything should be crystal clear to the keeper or the game master. And then the game master, or even throughout the rest of the scenario, you can help the game master to present that as a mystery to the players. But if the game master doesn't know what's going on, it's very, very difficult to run the game. So a little section at the start running through the main plot would have been great. All of the key events that are likely to happen. And modern Call of Cthulhu games are much better about providing this information up front. I guess this was a fairly early one. But this leads into my second criticism, is that the plot is so convoluted. Basically, Moriarty wants to ruin Sherlock's life and kill Sherringford and Mycroft, while also ruining Sherringford's reputation. Sure, I get that. But doing it this way is all over the place. The second murder makes some sense, so that the evidence really points towards Sherringford being the murderer. But I think the third murder is probably unnecessary. And then the abduction of the local girl Mina from the town. And why does Moriarty wait so long before sacrificing Mycroft? Is it just so that Holmes can witness it? Surely, Mastermind Moriarty would have had an ambush ready for Sherlock in that case. Because it seems like Sherlock, found the secret gate and figured that out. It seems like maybe he wasn't meant to do that. But if he wasn't meant to be there, then why wait before sacrificing Mycroft? Was it just so that the stars would be right? It's a little bit. But anyway, even if he wanted to do all of this and ruin Sherlock's life, but keep Sherlock alive, presumably Moriarty could do most, if not all of this, without revealing himself to Sherlock. Because if he doesn't kill Sherlock, Sherlock has already shown through the Reichenbach Falls that he's willing to kill Moriarty if he can't take him down legally. So Moriarty kind of presenting himself like this, even if he gains all this knowledge, Sherlock could just try and find him and kill him anyway in the future. So the next point, I'm going to say this a little bit brutally. Who cares about these characters? And don't run with that yet. Of course, Sherlock Holmes is a great character, and Mycroft we know, Sherringford, we don't know. Of course, the players want to be good, and they want to help Sherlock, and they want to fight the evil. But this, as it's presented, this is the first time that any of the investigators should have contact with Holmes. The whole plot revolves around the battle between Moriarty and Sherlock, who are two NPCs. And so even, as I'm sure you notice, at the outcome there, it doesn't really affect the players that much. Should they care so much? I feel like this could work if it was part of a longer campaign where they have worked with Sherlock before. Just to make it actually meaningful to them. Because, of course, Holmes is a great character, and you want to help him. You barely meet him throughout the scenario. He appears just to save you a few times, and that's about it. So I am planning a separate video later, because this one is already long enough, talking about how I would go about fixing this scenario. But yeah, that will be a later video. The next problem I have is that there are far too many mythos creatures in this one scenario. In the excellent book Stealing Cthulhu, they say that you should use one type of creature in your stories, like Lovecraft did. For example, the Whisperer in the Darkness has only the Migo. The Call of Cthulhu only has Cthulhu. And to quote the book, this makes the creatures seem vastly powerful. Lovecraft is saying this one thing could beat you all. If you use more creatures, you make them seem weaker. If, for example, Nyarlathotep controls the Migo, then the Migo become mooks. There's a small caveat there as well, but pretty much that's what they're saying. This story has Deep Ones, Night Gaunts, Biaki, Dark Young, Rat Things, Yeah, laptop, and probably more that I can't think off the top of my head. And this really detracts from the scenario and just makes it a mess, in my opinion. It can work out as part of a campaign, which I will talk about in the separate video on how to improve it. But quick fix if you're running this and you don't want all this convolution. The cultists in the house don't have to be deep ones. Just cut that out, and right there you're making it easier. Uh, yeah, simple. Anyway, some parts of this, so this is my next criticism, number 5, is some parts of it are just downright confusing. All indications, talking to Sherringford, seems that he was under some kind of spell before he killed Fishbane. And I think Jevers, one of the staff, actually references this, saying that he thinks Stark mesmerized Sherringford. So Sherringford kind of flies into almost unnatural rages when Fishbane is annoying him or harassing Lucinda. But then much later in the scenario, you find out that he was just drugged and brought to the scene of the crime and left there. So his uncharacteristic bouts of murderous rage don't seem to make any sense. Similarly, the former servants, so before they were replaced with Stark's men, kept disappearing without a trace. At the start, reading through this, I felt sure that they were being transformed into the rat things, but it seems that they just disappeared without a trace from their hometown, never to be seen again, apart from one who you can meet in the pub. Okay, the next criticism, number 6, almost there. This is not a good adventure for the Cthulhu by Gaslight setting book. This is the only adventure in the book, and if you're doing a new setting, so Cthulhu by Gaslight, you should start off with an introductory adventure so the players can kind of learn a little bit more about Victorian England in this case. So you learn it all, you learn the basic setting, and then you can grow into a more complicated one. But also the preceding book, so all of Cthulhu by Gaslight, deals almost exclusively with the layout of London. A lot of time is given to London. And then this adventure happens entirely in Yorkshire. So it kind of feels that this adventure is totally mismatched, and it makes a lot of the preparatory material seem like it was wasted. Of course, you can use it to create your own mysteries, but the provided mystery should, I think, should help you use that information. And my final criticism here is that too many clues or plot points are hidden behind very difficult, obscure roles. So, for example, like I mentioned before, to get the druid on your side, you need to first subdue him while he's shooting at you and possibly summoning a dark young, and then succeed on 3 very obscure roles. So occult isn't, and archaeology is a little bit, but botany is quite rare. So these start out at 5% chance for occult, 0% chance for botany, and 0% for archaeology, according to the 3rd edition rules of Call of Cthulhu. And so it's almost impossible. Well, it is impossible to score those if you haven't put points in botany and archaeology. And even if you have, it's going to be very difficult. So I think with such a convoluted plot, having some clues that are hidden is quite... the investigators will need all the help they can to get through this. So, slightly off topic, very, very slightly off topic just for a second. Trail of Cthulhu, which is a different rule set from Call of Cthulhu, says that they wanted to make this simplified game where core clues would be given to the players if they go to the right place, because some game systems, for example Call of Cthulhu, make it so that if someone misses a key clue, it can derail the entire adventure. When I first heard that, I was like, no, like just a decent keeper can like kind of make it, if you don't get it, the clue here, you might get it over here. Kind of rearrange it, or you don't get this clue, but a different separate clue can lead you to a similar location where you can pick it up. But I guess if Trail of Cthulhu was looking at an adventure like this, they would be like, there's so many things that you can miss just with a bad roll. So maybe that's what they were thinking of. So overall, I have to say I did not like this scenario as it's presented. I think there is some good potential here, and that's why I will make a separate video with ideas on how to improve it. The most disappointing thing about this is that a sourcebook like this should really include an introductory scenario to the setting to let the players and the keeper get used to a feel for this time. Apart from the appearance of Holmes and Moriarty, very little of this is even relevant to the Gaslight period. There's a couple of period things such as like gas lamps and stuff like that. But basically, if you assume that this takes place in the 1890s, it could easily be moved forward to the 1920s, just with an older Sherlock and a Moriarty. Although I guess by then they would probably be in their 60s, which is not great. But basically, there's no reason for this to be in the Gaslight. So it's not set in London, where this edition, most of the material is for London. It's not set in London, and it's only nominally set in the Gaslight period. So it seems strange for this to be the only scenario included in it. So this adventure was included in the first edition of Cthulhu by Gaslight and the second edition. And the second edition was pretty much just a reprinting of the first. The third edition, which I'll be reviewing soon, did not include this adventure. And I feel pretty confident in saying that the Yorkshire Horror will not be included in the forthcoming fourth edition of Cthulhu by Gaslight for Call of Cthulhu 7th edition. Unless this adventure undergoes huge changes. If you are interested in this scenario, I always like to give a little bit of background reading that you could do for like Lovecraft or Cthulhu mythos to help you get in the mood for it. The obvious connection is with the rat things to Dreams in the Witch House, so you could read a little bit about Brown Jenkins there. Maybe Rats in the Wall is also kind of thematic. Apart from that, I can't recommend strict Cthulhu mythos things, but you might be interested, either if you're interested in this kind of setting or in running this adventure. There are a number of Sherlock Holmes mythos stories that are quite good. The ones by James Lovegrove, I've read the 3 of those, and especially the first one I think could be appropriate for this scenario to help you kind of get in the mood a little bit more. The other ones take place elsewhere, so they wouldn't be quite as helpful. There's also another series of Cthulhu and Sherlock what would you call mashup, which I haven't read yet. I just got it yesterday, so I'm gonna have a read of the first one in the trilogy there, but that might be of interest to you as well. So that is where I will leave it for now. I can't really recommend this scenario without a huge amount of work from the keeper. However, if you are interested in it, please try it out. I will soon, I hope, be putting out a video on this channel talking about how it could be improved. So that might be of interest to you if this one is not. Both of the first edition and the second edition are a little bit pricey to buy. I would recommend probably just skipping ahead and getting the third edition. It has more source material and the adventures are better. If you're a completionist, you might want to try and get this. Just get the second edition. It's just a reprint of the first edition. Okay, so wow, long video, but that's all I have for you today. I hope, unless there's a surprise sale coming up. I will be back next video with a review of the third edition sourcebook of Cthulhu by Gaslight, moving on to the 2 included scenarios, Night of the Jackal and The Burnt Man. I feel like I misspoke there. First, I'll be doing the sourcebook part, which everyone can watch, and then I'll be moving on to scenario review videos. Okay, so that is everything. Thanks for sticking with me this long, and I'm sorry it wasn't a more positive review. Okay, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're interested in more of the Gaslight scenarios. They'll all be coming here. Okay, so take it easy everyone, and have a great weekend. Bye.